So today's webinar, it's the third one from our short series of webinars that focus on different aspects of public sector engagement with open source software. You can find recordings from two previous ones. One was in May, the other one beginning of June, on the ISA Square YouTube channel, but the link is also available on kind of our minutes or report from each webinar that you will find on OSOR, of course. We will also organize more webinars this year. We have already some topics. We will also ask you today, what are your ideas and what are the topics that you would like to hear about or discuss with other community members in our next webinars. Short description of our program for today. First, we will, of course, introduce our speakers. Then a short introduction of OSOR for those that never had the chance to look at the content of Observatory and are here for the first time. Then, of course, the key of our today event, two presentations. And finally, hopefully, we will have, of course, after each presentation, you will have a chance to ask speakers and discuss topics that you would like to hear about in depth. Then we will have also more general discussion. So let me now to introduce our speakers. First, Stig Dørmænen, who works as a senior advisor in the Norwegian Digitalisation agency. And the agency is actually a new body that was created in January 2020 as a merge of two other organizations, which is Bronze Register Center and Altin, the data management center of this register center. Stig, of course, will tell you more about it, and parts of Norwegian Agency for Public Management and e-Government. Stig is responsible in this agency for the Norwegian National Data Catalog, and he has been an open source enthusiast for many years and is now part of the drive towards encouraging public agencies in Norway to release software under open source licenses. So he will talk about how things are done in terms of open source development at the Norwegian Digitalisation Agency, and he will focus on challenges that may arise along the way, since the agency is really at the beginning of this journey. And he will also share some tips how they manage to overcome those challenges. Our second speaker, Philippe Bareille, is an open source officer at the city of Paris. He has over 10-year experience as Java software engineer. And as open source enthusiast, he spreads the word about free and open software in the public sector. He's in charge of external relationships regarding the Lutece software. And Lutece is a free and open source portal engine that allows users to quickly create a dynamic website or web application. And of course, we will hear about it more, but the most important information is that this project was launched in 2001, and since then it grew enormously. It is an initiative of the city of Paris, a very successful project, and Lutece has been used by more than 300 services right now. And Philippe will talk about the open source software development culture at the city of Paris, and will share good practices regarding software development based on his experience with the Lutece project. So we will hear very soon from both of them. Let me tell you who is with us from OSOR team right now. We have Vivienne, that will give you a short overview of our observatory, Federico, who will help me with moderating our discussion, and Chloe, who is helping us with technical matters, recording this event and sharing the screen. And I also, I'm accompanied today by my colleague Ruben Nerzul from Interoperability Unit. We work together, and we also work together on open source issues under our programs that we manage. So that's about the introduction. For those that are here for the first time, Vivienne will now give a short presentation of the observatory.
Thanks a lot, Monica. Welcome, everyone. So as mentioned, indeed, since 2007, OSOR has brought public administrations and open source communities together. And what we are is a single access point for information, and we aim to foster the use of open source within the public sector. OSOR is hosted on JoinUp. It is a commission collaborative platform, and its code is, of course, open and accessible to everyone. We already have plenty of resources available, such as news articles on the latest developments in the open source world within the public sector. We also share relevant events that you may be interested in to attend in the same line. And in fact, as a community member, you are also welcome to contribute and to publish yourself. And all you have to do is to create a JoinUp account. And all of our latest updates are also available in the monthly newsletter that we encourage you to sign up for. As OSOR, we also nurture our active community, and we bring the users together through regular webinars and workshops, such as this one today. And of course, one of our main key resources is the Knowledge Center on the left. We give users a variety of resources that they can access. So what we have in there is the country intelligence of open source policies in and beyond Europe. And so far, we have published reports outlining the status of open source policy in over 30 countries. And we also have many more planned for publication during and after the summer. Then another important thing is our guidelines for creating sustainable open source communities in the public sector. They were actually compiled with the community input, and they are currently in the process of being updated. And we also have case studies on the use of open source in public administrations. There you can learn more about good practices and, for example, how to overcome particular challenges. Another unique resource is our list of open source associations and competence centers and points of contact in each EU member state and beyond. And you can also access the latest European Commission OSS strategy. And finally, if you're into code, then we also have a list of OSS repositories that are relevant for or created by the public sector. Super. And that was from my side, the little OSOR overview. So now we have reached the next part of our webinar, which is to kick off the presentations by our guest speakers. So first of all will be Stig from the Norwegian Digitalized Agency, who will explain how they adapt to the OSS development culture. And Stig, if you are ready, I will let you start sharing your presentation as well.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation.
Yeah, it's visible. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I hope everyone is fine. Myself, I'm a little bit tired today after watching 2 awesome games in the European Championship last night. But anyway, I'll try to share some observations and thoughts around adapting to open source development in the Norwegian Digitalisation Agency. The Norwegian Digitalisation Agency, or DIGDIR for short, is the Norwegian government's foremost tool for digitalization of the public sector. And we are under the Ministry of Local Government and Modernization. The agency was, like it was said, established on 1st of January last year, and is a merger of the former public management and e-government and parts of the Brønnøysund Register Center. And I came in to dig there from the Brønnøysund Register Center, as I was in charge of, and still is in charge of, the development of our national data catalog. And also the Altinn service platform was merged into the Digder agency last year. We are distributed in 3 locations in Norway, in Oslo, Leikanger and Brønnøysund, and we have around 80 software developers, including Insourced resources. And the main tasks of our agency is to define the premises for digitalization and comprehensive information management in the public sector. And we're also coordinating measures across organizational boundaries and other public agencies in Norway. We do facilitating of the development of services for the general public and local authorities and businesses. And we do also develop national components and solutions, which the National Data Catalog and Altinn are 2 examples. And our services is mainly intended for use by the other agencies as technical infrastructure services. For example, identity management, the service platform, and the data catalog. And we are kind of on the beginning of our journey towards an open source software development culture. Although both Altinn and the National Data Catalog has been developed on open source licenses for many years, we do not have in place corporate policies or guidelines for open source development. And therefore, it's driven by a bottom-up approach by developers like myself and other in-sourced resources that think open source software development is the better way to develop and deliver software. And it's also hard to get top management to promote open source software development. I don't think we need to try to develop a business case for it, and I'll come back to that later. But on the right side, we get a lot of encouragement for other agencies and developers around us. Okay, so our motivation, my team's motivation, is that open source drive to the transparency in all aspects of software development. Not only is our source code available to the public, but also our projects and backlogs. So we do all the prioritization of what to do on our products on GitHub. We also believe that open source development improves the quality of our software, since it can be inspected by everyone and as such be open to feedback and contributions. We also think that a public agency should give back to the community so that others can use our source code and we may improve the quality of their software. Next point is highly anecdotal, but I think good developers tend to prefer open source software. And I think that's only based on my experience, but we believe it is so. And lastly, open source software is free as in beer. And that means the lower the barrier to try out new software, both that we can try out open source software, but also that our software would be easier to try out for the other agencies that it's meant for. There are a couple of drivers in our environment that also pushes open source software, in my view. We are going from heavily outsourcing development of software solutions to insourcing. And that's part of a national trend to insource software development, to take control over the whole development cycle. And a new sourcing policy that came out last year favors a DevOps culture of autonomous teams pushing changes frequently to public clouds. And it used to be 2 releases a year, and now my team pushes changes to production several times a week. Standardized services that we use may still be software as a service. So, hold on. And another notable example of the insourcing drive is that the former version of Altinn 2 platform was built on top of Infopath, which is a Microsoft product that is being deprecated. So they had to refactor their platform on a new software base, and they chose to go open source with everything. Another driver is, I think it's a universal trend to go from monoliths to microservices. And that's a great opportunity to take ownership of our source code. And also that small autonomous services are better for reuse, and open source is therefore more relevant as we see it. Furthermore, DigDer is the national authority on standardization. So we are in a great position to ensure interoperability between different software services. And the microservices are smaller and therefore easier to understand. And in that effect, it encourages the contributions from the community. Last driver I want to mention is that we are moving from one programming language to many. And the newly adopted microservice architecture makes it possible to develop small services in different programming languages. So in my team, we do what we call CV-driven development. That means if we're developing a new microservice, I ask the developers, which programming language do you want to learn? And which one do you want to put on your CV on LinkedIn? And then so they can pick Golang or Kotlin or Java if they prefer. And that's become quite a popular, they like it, the developers like it very much. And I think that also facilitates the re-implementation rather than the reuse of code. So if we are going to put forward a new version of a microservice, we re-implement it in a different language or from scratch in the same programming language it was originally in. We also believe that that would minimize the technical debt that you end up with in the long run. So today we have services implemented in Python, Java, Kotlin, Go, JavaScript, Node.js. We do not have any .NET services as of yet, but I'm trying to challenge my developers to put one forward. So in developing the national data catalog, so currently we have 174 repositories, all public repositories in GitHub. And we have 63 services running in production to realize the different aspects of the national data catalog. All of these are released under Apache 2 license. The team consists of 9 developers, and when they contribute to our source code, they do it using their own GitHub accounts. And that's because we think that encourage ownership to the code. We use GitHub Flow to be able to deploy continuously. And we also think that GitHub Flow is very much adapted to contributions from the community, as it has a strong focus on short-lived feature branches, pull requests, and code reviews. We used to have the more release-focused Git flow, but tended to be more complicated. And as we want to put code in production many times a week, the GitHub Flow is excellent choice for that. And I think the open source community also is very used to that mode of working. Now, we have some open challenges that we haven't really figured out how to solve. First one is, which language do we write documentation and code in? We do the programming in English, but our domain models is mostly in English or Norwegian. And the documentation is in Norwegian due to our customers are Norwegian-speaking public agencies. And laws and regulations are also in Norwegian. So we haven't found a good way to promote our solutions on an international basis. A data catalog, for example, is a highly international kind of, it's not a standard, but it's a common service to put up in Europe. But I think that going all English would alienate our Norwegian user base also. So we don't have any good decision on how to solve that as of yet. We also do lack a clear understanding of the different licenses out there. I think our first repository got released under Apache 2 license, and we have kind of stuck to that since. I think we recently we had put in place a Center of Excellence on the law and regulation things, and I think I will work with them to figure out if Apache 2 is the better license or we should go with something else. On more practical challenges, that our software is kind of specialized, but not that specialized. But the configuration to put it in deployment on the Google Cloud platform that we are currently on, we haven't found an elegant way to split the configuration from the software code. So currently we are hiding the configuration away in Helm repos, which also are public, but then there might be better ways to solve that in the future. So we're looking into that. We don't believe that our configuration for deployment is very interesting for the rest of the community. When it comes to contributions from the community, we have had some published guidelines. We push some published guidelines out on our repositories. We do lack a one central internet page that we can tell everyone how we want the contributions to be put to us. So I think the potential contributors have to look around in our repositories to find the relevant information. We have some READMEs, but we're not really good at standardizing those. We have all our issues and open issue tracker projects. So if there is a issue in one of our microservices, the community can find our issue tracker project stuck to our GitHub organization page and raise it there. And we have had a few public pull requests that have made it to production from other agencies in Norway, but there are very few as of now. I think maybe some of the challenges that the services we give to our environment is a highly specialized domain. A data catalog is not everyday service that a lot of people know. And being a public agency, we also struggle that we are perceived as an IT dinosaur. Even though I've been a consultant for 12 years and last 2 years I've been employment of the agency, I think this is the most agile and environment I've ever worked in, but I don't think the public in general perceive us as that. And we can also be highly bureaucratic, and that's a fact. And I think that also poses a challenge to the public. To mitigate this, we have released a data village, which is an internet forum. We released it 2 weeks ago. There we invite the general public to discuss open data and software with us. And we have partnered with other agencies in Norway so that they can respond to questions and comments on their services. And we're trying to engage the other base registry owners in our forum. And I think that was a smart move, and we're trying to build a greater community around that. When it comes to contributions to the community, we reuse solutions to prevent reinventing standard services. And when we choose what software to use for those services, we prefer open source software based that we either know or want to learn more about. So as of now, we have used NodeDB, which is a forum kind of software. We use Strapi as a content management service for publishing static information. We use MongoDB as a database. We also have a Drupal installation. We use React for the presentation layer, and we also have a user of RDFlib, since we are pushing linked data as a means to link data between all the Norwegian agencies. We have raised some issues on the other software solutions we use to request new features. And we have also created a few public pull requests on those to improve the other solutions and also to contribute back. But it's hard to, with the limited resources, to prioritize contributions to the community. But we do want to make that a bigger part of our daily work than it is today. Some 3 weeks ago, I was contacted by the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, and they are working towards with the Digital Public Goods Alliance, which is an open source software standard and open content that adhere to privacy and other applicable best practices that is relevant for the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we are today trying to push Altinn3, our new application development and hosting platform, as a candidate for the Digital Public Good standard. And I didn't know about this alliance before, but I want to mention it because I think that their vision share a lot of the goals that the OSOR community is also working towards. Altinn has been around for a long time, but now in the new version is a complete rework of that platform. So to sum up, my short presentation is that we need to work with the management to understand why we should do open source software development. And I think we need to build a kind of a business case for open source development. And I don't think it's intuitively a smart thing to do for the management, even though the developers I know highly prefer the open source licenses and the community mode of working. In Dig there, we need to put in place a formalized governance practice to lower the bar to adopt open source development culture, so that not every team has to rethink every decision that we have made on the start of our journey. And I also think that the key factor to be able to adopt is to empower the teams in order to have them choose the right tool for the task. So, and this year we are going through an organizational refactoring, and we try to organize our agency along the value streams and not the functional teams that we have today, so that every team is able to make the right decisions for the team without needing to escalate every decision. So that's also an ongoing task. My last slide is just that I dropped some link to our GitHub repos and also other notable Norwegian agency embracing open source development. So the NAV, the Norwegian Labour and Welfare Administration, is probably the best agency in Norway on open source software. And they have also published their guidelines out on their GitHub account for how to do open source software development. So I would kind of suggest that maybe OSOR should invite NAV to our next meeting in the future. Okay, that was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Stig, thank you very much for sharing your experience and the situation as it is now in the new created agency, but also and the fact that two organizations were merged. Questions and some comments in the chat. So we would like to start with them. Some of them actually are also applicable, I think, and could be asked to our second speaker to share this experience, especially that Lutece is a long established project, and definitely there is a support of management and also policy support in France and the city of Paris. So experience shared by Philippe will be very useful for you, I'm sure. But let's start with questions from our participants. I think Yanis, hello Yanis, is very active. If instead of me reading your questions, if you could just unmute yourself and ask it yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Monica. Hi, everyone. The question was, I didn't catch your meaning about how re-implementation is better than reuse in case of how you do the microservices. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit.
Yes, I think that reuse of code kind of build your technical debt, and when you have a very large code base, it's not feasible to re-implement if you want to change it. But if you have small enough microservice, I think for the understanding of the developer and also to avoid technical debt to arise, I think the re-implementation, you scratch the old code and re-implement it in a better way every time. And we do put in place for all of our APIs, we try to do API first. So we do have an API specification upfront. So, and also we have tried to cover all our APIs with good contract tests that would kind of our CI/CD process will run on every change. So that means that what language you're implementing your service in is not the very important. And also in my own experience and what I heard from my developers, that to write new code is better than to change someone else's code.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So what I hear is that first it drives innovation faster, but my question was more like, is it also cheaper, which is I think important for every public entity to save taxpayers' money.
Yes, I think it's in the long run because of the technical debt. I have seen so many old legacy software, huge monoliths, and some of our other agencies are spending millions of euros trying to refactor the solutions. So and those projects can last 5 or 6 or 10 years. So I think the continuous change is the drive that motivates reimplementation.
Okay, thank you. That explains. And my other question was about how do you build communities in Norway? I mean, public institutions sometimes are quite closed, and then there should be some model how to involve external parties. We have this old one with buying software development services or software. But open source projects are about being community driven. So what's your approach, and especially in aspect of how it's being financed? Thank you.
We used to have a center of excellence on open source software. It was called Friprog Center, and it was started by the Ministry of Modernization some years ago. For some reason, they closed it down in 2017, I think. So, but I think the people working there are now employed in the other agencies, and like myself, and especially the Norwegian Labour and Welfare Agency has been kind of the IT driver in Norway, modernizing their huge solutions, and they have embraced open source software development for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but that's what they did, and they have proven to the other agencies that this is a good way to approach development. And also they have employed a lot of great software developers. Also recruited a lot the better ones from the consultancies around. So we're trying, all other agencies now trying to be like the Norwegian Labour Agency. So the community is kind of bottom-up driven, and they have established several Slack communities where developers meet and discuss. But like I said, we do lack kind of a top-down approach from our government, from our ministries is lacking. So we're trying to build that now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. This helps, because in Latvia it's going on vice versa, top down, and then we don't have this bottom up, and yeah, we're thinking how to. But yeah, thanks. I will not take more of the time. Probably more questions from other people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But
Thanks.
thank you, Yanis. Thank you, Stig, for your answers. We have more questions. One of them is from Jonas. It's about policy, open source policy in place, and specifically about policy on procurement. So, Jonas, if you allow me, I will read your question. Are there any policy in place in Norway saying that open source software should be first alternative to consider in procurements? By the way, we have a report on the situation of policy in different countries, all member states and other countries, and among them Norway. This report was published on OSOR this year. So we have some knowledge on that, and actually I'll know the answer, but I will allow you to answer. And also we are curious if maybe something is in preparation, not only about procurement, but also, policy in general. So there is an agency, new created agency. There is a push bottom up, but still there are things going on. And there is also certain climate around Europe and in the world, and regarding use of open source. So is anything in the preparation that you are aware of, and specifically about procurement?
Yeah, thank you. I have read the report, and now I can't remember the correct answer to that. But I'm not aware of any policy that says anything about open source explicitly. We do have my agency has some architectural principles that is strongly focused on reuse of services. But I'm not aware that there is anything on the open source, and I think the putting down on the 3% that I mentioned is probably a symptom of the lack of the politicians' focus on open source development.
Mm-hmm. So indeed, there is no explicit policy on that. There are some recommendations, and for example, Norwegian Ministry of Modernization recommended the use of open document format ODF and standard
Yes.
PDF for all official documents.
Yes.
And this recommendation has been accepted. But when it comes to procurement as such, we haven't identified any legal or policy documents. So
Yes.
this is actually not necessary to drive this type of change. So hopefully your action will contribute to acceptance of the fact that open source should be considered, and actually it's beneficial for public administration to procure open source. So
Absolutely. So the standards you're mentioning is that my agency is responsible of publishing a registry of standards, so to speak. But those standards are on how to exchange data between agencies and also between the agencies and the public. I don't recall that they say anything about open source, unfortunately. So you're right. We have to put some put some initiatives to escalate this up to the ministry and the politicians, I think. And hopefully the digital public good standard, Altinn has a great standing in Norway. And if we can have that happen, I think that also might contribute a push towards awareness around open source software.
So you have mentioned Data Village, and your observation is actually that this is quite successful initiative. And are you planning to have some other initiatives that aim at raising awareness, both among citizens and public sector peers? Because this is the way actually to change the way the agency is perceived. Also, it may help, to attract talent. So you have more people that support you in the bottom up push for adoption of open source? Is anything in the planning?
Okay, so the merger happened 1st of January 2020 last year. And immediately we started on an organizational refactoring process that should merge all the three communities, the developer communities that were merged into one organization. And unfortunately, the pandemic put an end to that process. So when we're coming out of this, there is a lot of focus on refactor organization around. So now it's very hard to drive anything like that. But I think that next year or maybe this fall, we will start working towards putting in place a formalized initiative. So, like myself, there is in my department, there is a great understanding of open source development, but you can go to the other department. They do not embrace it at all. So for us to succeed today, we would have to put it to the director. And as I mentioned in the presentation, and when up at the higher management, understanding of open source development is not there at all, I think. Probably we have to have some ministry or politicians telling our top management that open source is the way to go.
Yeah, so still a lot of work ahead.
Yes, indeed.
There is a question from my colleague from the Commission and our open source program office. Hais Hilenius. Hais, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Good morning, everybody. This is indeed Hais Hilenius, and thank you for this presentation, Stig. It's very interesting. I've been making tons of notes, and I have a lot of questions, but I don't think it's worth our time. But one thing I would like to know is there an open source trade association somewhere in Norway? Are open source ICT service providers somehow organized? Are they working with Dig?
No, I'm not aware of anything like that. It's mostly spread around in informal communities. There are a lot of energy in those communities, crowded by developers with their eagerness to share code, but there is no formalized community or anything like that, unfortunately. So we do have kind of a strong focus on open data. So we recently we scored very bad on the open data. It's called Open Data Maturity Assessment from the EU, and that created a lot of noise for us. And initiatives were put in place to mitigate so that we can climb up to the position in the maturity assessment where we were before. So that was a good thing, and I think that we should have some other, for example, an open source software maturity index or something. That would probably be a factor that the politicians would trigger on, I think. If Norway is on the bottom of that list, I think we would probably get a lot of attention.
Yeah, I don't think you're on the bottom of that list. I was just wondering, is the Norwegian Unix user group an important factor?
I have heard of that, but no, not.
Okay, I will offline send you a link to a maturity model developed by OW2, which is an industry association with a heavy presence in France. But that could be interesting for you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think I can ask back to the OSOR people. Is there anything like an open source maturity index or anything like that? That would be interesting too.
No, it doesn't exist, but we must admit with HICE, we have discussed that actually it would be useful. But it's not that easy process to create it, and especially if it's done by the commission, it's just, and then really, if you would like to use it an official tool, the process to arrive to something that is accepted by all member states probably takes time. But this is something to consider for me and my colleagues, and from both for OSOR and the Commission OSPO in the future.
Absolutely. Great.
Thank you very much. It's time for our second presentation. So Stig, thanks a lot for sharing your experience and all the insight when it comes to all your challenges that you face in the process of promoting and adopting open source software development culture in your organization and hopefully in Norway. So we will still have, if there are questions to Stig, there will be some time after Philippe Bareille and his presentation and questions to him particularly, but then we will have this more general discussion for at least 10 minutes. So there will be a chance to also answer more questions if there are any to you, Stig. So once again, thank you very much. And now it's time for
Thank you
Philippe,
for letting me present.
Thanks. It's time for Philippe Bareille to speak about his experience with Lutece project and how the city of Paris is committed to open source on the basis of this experience with Lutece. Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Monica. I'm about to share my screen in just a minute. Would you please tell me when it's okay? It
is okay. You can start.
Perfect. Thank you. So hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar. As Monica said very well, my name is Philippe Bareille, and I am an open source officer at the City of Paris. I also work as a technical project manager on a few digital services, well, actually several digital services within the city's IT department. And I'm in charge of external relationships between our internal development team, partners, and also community. So first of all, I would like to deeply thank the European Commission for having me today and giving me a chance to showcase how we do open source at the City of Paris. I'll be very happy to answer any questions and connect after this presentation.
Before starting, Philippe, sorry for interrupting.
Sure.
Can we ask to put the full screen just to...
Sure can. You're right. Is it any better?
Perfect.
Thank you. So today I'll go over the open source policy at the City of Paris, which, as you'll notice, is a long time story. So the city's commitment started back in 2001. Actually, when Mayor Delanoë asked the IT department to come up with a system that would allow the content management of the websites for the 20 districts of the city, along with the ability to adapt their designs to the local mayor's political parties. So at that time, no free and open source CMS existed. And after a full study, because open source software already was a requirement, we decided to build our own, to be compliant with the specific needs of our municipal context. So that was way before Joomla, Drupal, WordPress, or even SPIP existed. So shortly after the project was launched, the newly elected Council of Paris decided to promote an open source strategy. So they voted to share and open source the software developed by the City Hall. They strongly believed that public money should benefit other municipalities or administrations, and therefore citizens would only pay once for the public code. This is how Lutece was born. And for those who don't know yet, Lutece is the ancient Roman name of the City of Paris. So over the years, as new features came out and were integrated in our information systems, we quickly focused on the architecture to make it as modular as possible. Because we're a municipality with low and decreasing budget, but yet big digital ambitions. So the head of the project set up a ready-to-reuse type architecture. We externalized a core project with all the remaining, the recurring functionalities, and made the CMS features available as plugins, and moved on adding reusable plugins. So now the project offers more than 300 digital services on shelf, and that represents more than 4.6 million lines of code, I think. It goes differently every day, so it's around that. And it can be used to generate, a multi-step form based on a powerful workflow engine, which probably represents 80% of the administrative queries. There is also an appointment booking system that runs in all operational districts of the city, offering, I think, as of today, more than 380 different calendars and shared agendas for citizens to sign in or to actually book. There's a 311 type application, which is used to report non-emergency incidents in the public space. It's called Dørmænen, in my street. There's also a participatory budgeting tool, which has been used to implement citizens' projects worth 100 million euros per year. There is also a CRM made with Lutece that stands for Citizens Relationship Management and not Customer, obviously. And this was just to name a few. There are bunches of others, and as you'll be able to tell in a minute, we work with plugins. So we have more than 500-600 different plugins, but assembling them differently make some new and different digital services. And all of them, I must be honest, 90 to 95% of them are based on standard and are reusable plugins, which makes a solid and reliable software for a municipality to use. So the project was, and still is, developed over real needs and our elected officials' engagements. So thanks to this architecture, it enables reuse and quick development and quick deployment of city services. So to give you an example, the participatory budgeting project was launched in a first version in only 3 months after Mayor Hidalgo announced it. So finally, of course, Paris is a fairly big city with sometimes needs that are unique because of the way we are internally organized. But most of them, let's face it, are shared with every city. More than 80%, I would say, are shared with every city, no matter the size. To give you a few examples of recent use cases, recently the city of Budapest, Hungary, came and saw how we implemented our own participatory budgeting solution in Paris to learn and benefit from our 6-year. Can you still hear me? Just a question.
Yes, yeah. All good.
Okay, sorry, okay, thank you. My VPN is all blanking around. Sorry. So I was saying that the city of Budapest in Hungary came to Paris and saw how we implemented our own participatory budgeting solution to learn and benefit from our 6-year experience to launch their own and reuse our software. So we cross fingers that we shall soon have few plugins available in Hungarian language. At last, a very interesting adoption that I really like very lately is directly related to the health crisis that we all know. When visiting residents in medical facilities has become a challenge for the staff, but also for the residents who cannot remain isolated from their relatives. So last year, Lutece was also deployed on a nursing home website to book visits. Okay, more about the policy now. The impact of Lutece on the city digital services is pretty big. It holds hundreds of them in all operational districts. It facilitates the e-administration, of course, along with an inclusion policy for those who do not access them. So the software aims at the citizens, but also facilitators on behalf of them. The services provided tend to more and more help people get involved in the city to improve their lives as citizens. So this is how we came up with more and more tools around participatory democracy. As we'll see in the next slide, what else than open source to achieve this, right? So in a municipality, we need our elected officials to understand and sponsor the culture of open source. This is a requirement, a real need. We cannot, as civil servants, bring this in a bottom-up way. It has to be promoted officially. So by doing and contributing to open source, it's a long time effort. Fortunately, back 20 years ago, because that was 20 years ago, 2001, a few elected officials knew how important it was to make it available freely for any administrations or any contributors to join as well, lowering as much as possible any barriers to adoption. This would be the best opportunity to share best practices, share the cost of development, maintenance, and share roadmaps. We were able to pursue this culture along. The last recently elected team also fosters these efforts. So, I'm sorry, I'm gonna break open doors. But as you know, and this is even more important and true in the public sector, there are several key factors which are important for us and the use of open source. The first one is trust, of course. Open source establishes trust and transparency between citizens and public services. When you set a digital service factory with our form generator, for say, a participatory budgeting solution, an appointment booking system, a tax simulator, you need to make sure that citizens trust you as a city so that they use the service and support you in the digital transition. Open source and open code means anyone can deeply look at how things are done. There are no bias, and that equity in the processes is guaranteed. So then we also support the fact that when we use public money, we should therefore, as far as possible, provide with public code. You would recognize the FSFE message. We also believe that sharing and collaborating between cities and administrations bring progress, innovation, by promoting reuse, money savings, and so on. Working together enables richer, smarter, more flexible software developments adapted to the common needs and concerns of the citizens. So there is no point in developing from scratch when there are already existing and working and moreover used and maintained solutions out there, as we share the same concerns and needs. Cities have their own means to regain control over their digital services, including cost and privacy control. They must work together in the same direction for digital sovereignty and independence. Having control on our digital services also help us reuse our developments. We are not forced to pay again and again for the same things. This means that we need to always keep in mind how to build in order to be reused. This is very cultural. So whenever we need to launch a new service, we only focus on what's new and reuse and how the reuse can be. This is how the participatory budgeting could be made in only 3 months. This is a culture that is deeply rooted in our practices. So to tell you more about our teams, we have, let's say, roughly a couple teams. One that is internal, very few people, 10 to 12 people that are in charge of the core projects. There's another team, way bigger, over procurement, that help us maintain most of our digital services. Another pro for open source is obviously cost saving. But not cost saving only for development, but also in support and maintenance. It is observed that the cost of maintenance is less than 1% of the software when it is open source, in comparison with more than 20% when it comes to proprietary. So at the City of Paris, we're both users of open source and as well contributors, as we just saw. So Lutece, which source code is accessible to anyone, but is also based on standards. We did not develop the whole thing. We also integrated already existing open source application building blocks into our Lutece plugins and modules. So when it's possible, we join open source initiatives on needs that we share with other institutions. This is how we contributed to projects such as Botalista. Maybe a few of you have heard of this initiative that developed a management software package, botalista.community, which is designed to cover all the business processes of a botanical institute, along with other cities from France and Switzerland. France, Switzerland, get it? Then there is the ENT, that stands for Digital Workspace Environment, for the entire educational community. So students, teachers, families, and educational staff, which is used in all schools in Paris, and that's more than 247. And there's another one, EPM, that deals with procurement. It's a project that we share with the French government and called the GIP, or Public Interest Group Maximilien, and which is shared with the state. So every time we identify that reuse is not enough, we're actually missing a piece of functionality, the first step is to check if an open source component or library would fit our need and is sustained with a big enough community. So before there's no point, there's no point in developing something that already exists, works perfectly. So for example, for cache managing, we chose the cache component. For the rich text editors, we used 2 or 3 different ones. For suggest mechanisms, we used the Apache library Mahout, and so on. So as I said, we're not a big team internally, so there's no formalization of how the open source software development culture. I said this culture was very deeply rooted in our practices, but it comes with the experience. It comes naturally. Most of the time, when the need is known, we try to find 2 or 3 different use cases to extract what can be seen as generic and what can be more optional and seen as a module. And then for us to provide it on shelf for people that share the same need for that option. So we provide support to our contractors, and we sometimes see that this culture is not always shared. So we need, when reviewing the PRs, to advise them and make sure that what they do can be reused and valuable, not for specifics. So more on the architecture and why plugins, why modules, what difference between, etc. So usually when another administrations come to us asking for our experience, we can showcase the platform and encourage them to use it. We do have a support team that can help in the first steps, but in the context of an integrated team, it becomes hard to provide any user with support. We deeply hope for the community yet to be built and sustainable. We're very linked, very closely to our own internal projects. So this is why we are not, with the size of our team, able to provide anyone with support. This is when anyone could enter the game. So when it comes to projects that we are only users or members, we leave the governance to the teams in charge. We propose features, and we can also offer to co-develop some when the need is way too urgent. So back to Lutece and why and how we fostered the adoption of Lutece is that, first of all, the license we chose for our signature platform was BSD. It's probably the best, the most the easiest, that would facilitate as much as possible its adoptions, reuses, and contributions. Our goal is not to protect our code. We're just lucky enough to have an internal team, to have budget to develop our own digital services, and we want to share them. That's it. We do want to make it as easy as possible for anyone to join and contribute back. So ever since, the City of Paris has continuously improved its open source software and I guess I'm getting too long. My headset quit on me. At the same time, it's been making the source code freely available. So thanks to many efforts to lower the barriers to adoption, we launched the MOOC last year. We also have a Lutece school made by a partner. Many users came, some contributed, some moved on, some came back, and newcomers still deploy Lutece-based websites. An important thing to know is that Lutece does not need to replace a whole information system at once and for all. It can be benchmarked as in a silo at first, integrated in a very specific thing at first, then plugged in. And if it fits, then handle more and more features, and all new developments can be done on Lutece from then, just like the city of Lyon did. So with the head of development, Pierre Lévy, I'm also in charge of the external relations. This is also something that we need to take very close care at. The project did benefit a lot from these contributions back in the days, functionality-wise, as well as contribution-wise, and made us learn on how to manage the community, even though we still have to improve. Oops, sorry. So it's a long time effort, of course. We try our best to connect with the more people. We are board members of the OW2 consortium that help us scale, evaluate, and promote Lutece throughout Europe. We're also contributing on their good governance initiative that aims to set goals in our culture of open source within the city. And we'll soon be giving our feedback based on our experience. Because we are also in the process of studying the setup of an OSPO for the city, an open source program office. As partnerships go, we need to gather all contacts, connections, and work through these type of team. So the Good Governance Initiative launched by OW2, the Eclipse Foundation, and also OFE will help us there, and we're also hoping for as many cities to join this. There are also partnerships coming up with other cities and universities, as I just said. And we've been involved for more than a year now in the OSPO++ workshops, where a group of open source projects, representatives from universities, cities, private companies, or even independents meet and discuss on good practices and how work can be done together and how the community can organize. So if Lutece is also a long-timer project, it's because, well, at first the architecture was the right thing to do 20 years ago. And probably because the technology chosen was also a good choice. Low and decreasing projects, municipal context, we cannot allow ourselves to redevelop every single year, every other year, because there's no compatibility with the previous versions. We cannot pay for this, really. So it's also thanks to the fact that it's being used, maintained, and continuously upgraded. The platform is often benchmarked internally and compared to other free and open source solutions. And it's still used after 20 years. The most critical aspect is probably to show that it can be used in other municipalities and that we need to scale it as much as possible with many more cities. So this is not a concept project with a lot of communication around an empty nutshell. We believe we could do better in communications, that's for sure, but the word needs to be spread. I would like to thank you all for your attention. I hope this was helpful and somehow gave you ideas of how you could reuse Lutece, benchmark it, benefit from more implementations of public services, digital services. So hopefully want to continue to contribute back and work with us together on a mutual platform. I'll be happy to answer any questions the best I can.
Philippe, thank you very much for a great presentation. I'm sure that although you mentioned that communication still is kind of an issue and you need to communicate more, you're doing really a great job communicating about Lutece.
Thank you very much.
Judging from this presentation. I have some questions myself, and I believe participants too, and I would like to start with the question from the participant. Jonas Sodergren from Swedish Public Employment Service. If you could please unmute yourself and ask the question that you posted in the chat.
Yes. So, hey everyone, thank you for a good presentation. And I really think what you said in the beginning is all about the trust between the citizen and the municipality. And for us, it's the trust between the citizen and the state. And I think open source really can contribute with the transparency in those kind of questions. But I think, do the citizen have any possibility to give feedback in an open way, like GitHub issues, public forum, etc.? Because I really think that in our country right now, we are discussing a lot about AI technology and that kind of proprietary solutions should make decisions, and nobody really understand how it's working, and it scares me a lot. So is there any open discussion possibility with the citizen?
Open discussion, yeah, there are a few platforms, but it's more based on suggestions. There's one application called, well, actually, it's a website called Madame le Maire, j'ai une idée. It translates to Mrs. Mayor, I have an idea, and it's there for citizens to propose ideas, pretty much like in the participatory budgeting solution, but there's no engagement with money, etc. It's just like, okay, I'm giving you my opinion and my contribution idea wise. I don't know if this answers your question. Then we have to every digital service, almost every one of them, we also ask for the citizens' not advice, but at least opinion? Was it helpful? Did you get what you wanted?
I understand. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I have a question regarding, that refers to our main topic, because you presented how the culture, or open source development culture, looks like in city of Paris, and especially around Lutece project. And of course, it has been a very long process, because you started in 2001 with already good support from decision makers and policy makers, which is one of the important factors to actually to contribute to this development of collaboration culture. And you also mentioned the communication aspects and community management. So there will be like three main factors. But yes, what are the other factors that actually are essential, at least in your case, or maybe in more general terms, that contribute to this development of open source software development culture, which equals a collaboration culture?
I would say that the fact that our elected officials know and sponsor this approach. It is not only helpful, but it's really needed. As I was saying earlier, we are allowed to communicate on the project. We are allowed and encouraged in reusing open source solutions, because they feel all of the advantages of all the pros I was telling you about earlier. By fostering the open source culture, they allow us, and they even more tell us, that we can make cost savings and we can improve our services by using open source. As I was saying also earlier, I think it's something around 95% of startups use open source. I mean, it goes without a word.
True.
But when you were talking about communication, yes, now that we are also allowed to tell about what we do internally, it's not based on an empty nutshell. There are people that have been contributing to the project. And yes, I wanted to say that a community, if it's left on its own, is not sustained. It just blows up. So at first, when we released Lutece, a few communication were made around the project, and a few partners really very quickly joined this initiative, such as Météo France, which is the French weather forecast organization, and which was the most visited website at that time, with more than 1 million visitors per day. So they contributed back to the project, adding the load management system that we have today, because we were not facing those issues before. So thanks to them, we could benefit from their experience. But then, as I was saying, if you're back to work and forget about the communities, wrongly thinking that it can still be there, hang out around you, and still pull request some code, then you'll see that a couple of years after, these people will be over to some other projects they would have left. And this is what happened to Lutece, because at some point we were trying to promote the platform. Some other time we could not sustain this, because we had elected officials projects to do, and all of a sudden people and contributors were all gone. So now, since I would say for the 4 to 5 years, we are trying to maintain this communication and this adoptions the best we can.
Thank you very much. So good luck with that, because it's not only on maintaining the team and involvement team members, but also to attract talent and make sure that Lutece can be developed further and innovative processes are included. So good luck with that.
Thank you.
I have some more questions, but first checking. Federico, do you see questions?
Yes, there is a question from Daniele Pagani. I don't know if, Daniele, you want to go ahead and ask your question yourself. Otherwise, we'll be doing that.
Yes, good morning. The question is about governance. So I would appreciate if you can tell more about, how you manage the decision-making process about new features, about the direction of the product, and how you involve the community in that process.
Sure. So about functionalities and whether or not a feature must be developed in open source on the platform, it is a very highly taken decision that's made all the way up to every big project that comes up. Every single time we see around if an open source projects or similar can be integrated or can be contributed to, and since then, or this as a starting point, we have the head of development of open source development. Okay, just to make sure that in our internal team, we do not have only developers. We do have half developers and half architects. These are the ones that maintain the best and have the best vision of what feature shall be integrated in either the core project or in an already existing plugin, or if a new module needs to be developed. This is how this decision is made. It's like in a review committee or development committee before a project is launched and it is started. We already have the architecture team decide whether or not the new development should be integrated there or there.
And this architecture team is all internal, or you also involve people from the community from other cities in this process?
No, it's only internal because so far we only have, or at the moment, the city of Marseille was a user but is not anymore. They are in the process of coming back probably. The city of Lyon has voted that every new digital services would be developed on Lutece. So they don't have an internal team, so they go by a contractor or procurement, and if they are the ones in touch with us. But they're more like, can we do this way? What would you advise us to do in a context of having this feature evolve? Then there are a few meetings where our internal architecture team and anyone who develops on it agree. So then it facilitates the PRs. Really, it's only made to make the process easier, and that the PR will be accepted more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Philippe. I see there is a question from Natasha in the chat. Natasha, do you want to take the lead, or should we read your question?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Natasha Milic-Schweling, and I work with computer scientists and organizations on long-term use of software. So hearing about really great work that communities put in creating the software, and then having in mind this uncertainty around promotion and support. I was just wondering, besides the repositories of source code that exist, whether there is any other measure, anything else done to make sure that people can easily install or use the previous installations, because in many situations, especially now with the AI, machine learning, people may need to reproduce results of the use of software. So I'm just wondering whether the community has thought about a longevity of installations as opposed to just the longevity of source code.
Very good question. That's true. We keep enhancing the project, but every time a new plugin is released, all the digital services that are that rely on it, or that are based, or that are using this new released plugin, need to be updated. For the communities, it's very easy to do this internally because we specifically know what projects use what plugin. We do have that map that help us know, because it's also very helpful when there's a security or a vulnerability to be fixed. Then we know that these numbers of websites need to be upgraded as soon as possible and rely on the latest release. But yes, when it comes to the community, then it's much harder to communicate. We have redone our website. There's a forum there. There are news, etc. But since we still haven't faced, so I'm crossing fingers here, we still haven't faced a major vulnerability so far. So there was no need to go proactive and say, people, there's something that you need to fix as soon as possible, or this is the fix that you need to integrate as soon as possible. Fortunately, this hasn't happened yet, because the code and the infrastructure is being audited twice a year. So as soon as we have vulnerabilities, they're being fixed. But to answer your question, no, there is no retro compatibility between versions. We cannot do this. We're not editors. We don't provide everyone with support, unfortunately. We wish, but we cannot. We can only answer questions like either in forum or via Twitter. I've noticed that many technical questions went through Twitter in like private messages, but we cannot implement new features. See, for an example, Lutece version 7 is about to come out anytime this year. We're already in a in a release candidate version 7. So let's hope that by the end of the summer it will be released.
And
all
Philippe,
plugins. Yes.
For interrupting, because we're running a bit out of time.
Sure.
So maybe just a very last question. If you kindly, I mean, Lutece is an international, is based on an international community. So if you could kindly share with us what are the good practice put in place to facilitate this multicultural collaboration. Just very briefly, if there is any.
Very briefly, yes. Well, I'm going to give you an example of how we work with the University of Johns Hopkins, based in Baltimore, in the U.S. It's been a 2-year-long contribution, and they've helped us dealing with locale, with time zones, and other great things in IT that we had never really taken care of before because there was the need. But these people are integrating a Lutece website on a community and on an NGO. and we meet every week on a technical meeting where they can ask any questions. I've added them on a Slack channel, so everyone is welcome to be added on this Slack channel where we can talk about technical aspects as well as functional aspects, contribution wise and functionality wise. So based on this experience, it's way enough to meet, let's say, a dozen minutes, 15 minutes tops every week, so they know where the project is, if the release is soon to be out or why it still hasn't. They can propose their help. We can tell them and also encourage them to help us on the very specific aspects, and we can also provide them with support, technical support, by meeting every week. I mean, there's no big risk when they fail or when they encounter a problem or a technical issue that they cannot fix themselves because it's too close to the core or there are too many dependencies. Then I and a few other people from the team are there to help and to provide them with a bit of support.
Thank you very much. I have something very short, because it should be really last question, that is linked to this previous question, because this community is not only multicultural but also multilingual. And already Stig mentioned that there is a bit of a problem with language to use when it comes to their software. It's something it's in English, something it's Norwegian, or both. You have community members and also services in other countries that use Lutece, and there are more languages than two, definitely. So how this aspect is solved? Just briefly, please.
Briefly, what do you mean communication-wise between the contributors and us?
Communication, I believe that probably it's mainly English and French, depending on the country, but
It
also when it comes to the documentation, these aspects.
Okay, the documentation is only in English and French, because in every IT or every technical module, it's always the use of English that it's done. So we would like people to contribute because we and I must say not everyone speaks English or not very well. So most of the documentation is done by us internally. Sometimes user guides are written in English by contributors, but mostly English. And we would like to have, and this is something that I usually also say, that if you want to contribute to the project, there is no need to find the missing feature or the fixes to help us. There are also other types of contributions, such as helping us translating the solution, but for front end as well as back end features, for all those language resources that are available. So I was talking earlier about Hungarian. We still haven't got it, but the whole resource, the whole language resources are also shared either in GitHub or in also another platform called Crowdin. And Crowdin is a very easy to use platform that allow you to see what message and propose a translation to Polish, to Spanish, to all the existing languages. And that way the platform can benefit from those contributions right away. They almost do not need to be supervised. So it's a direct contribution. Sure.
Thanks. We have to finish. We still have a couple of words on our future plans when it comes to publications and webinars. So I would like to thank you very much, both Stig and Philippe. And please stay with us until the end so we can communicate about our plans. Federico, if you could please take over.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Monica. So just a few words on what's going on right now within OSOR and what you can expect to see in the upcoming weeks. So for the time being, as I was mentioned at the beginning by Vivienne, we are in the process of updating the sustainable the guidelines for sustainable community within public administration. So we have you have the opportunity to share with us your feedback, and it will be really appreciated. So please feel free to follow the link in the chat or reach out by email and share with us your contribution that will be taken into account for the updated version of the guidelines that will be published in the coming weeks. Then a few more words on ongoing activities. As Monica mentioned at the beginning, there are country reports on the European countries, but also beyond Europe. So we'll be publishing 5 new country reports. So you can either turn on your RSS feed to have a notification as soon as they're out, or you can subscribe to our newsletter, and every month we'll be sending a summary of the latest publication. Additionally, we are working on a report on the role of open source during the COVID-19 crisis. And as soon as it will be published, of course, you will be reading on it on OSOR. So also in that case, feel free to turn on your RSS feed or subscribe to the newsletter. Another point was related to the guidelines, as I was mentioning before, and I won't be repeating myself, so just stay tuned. And finally, we are also developing a case studies on EMEO that will be shortly published. So for the time being, we have more than 119 case studies. We are keep expanding the collection. So if you're interested, keep an eye on it. Or on the other hand, if you have any insights of successful story or good practice to be shared, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to follow up on that. Just one small, let's say, interactive session. We don't have a lot of time, so we have 2 questions for you, and we will kindly ask you to publish your answer within the chat or reach out to us through the email that was showed before and will be shown again in a few seconds. So if you are aware of any public administration that is successfully involved in the open source ecosystem and is willing to share its story in the next OSOR webinar, please don't hesitate to share the detail or the name of the organization or the point of contact, so we can get in touch with the related person. And also at the beginning, Monica was mentioning that there will be new events that will be announced soon on OSOR. So yeah, we are interested also to know your preferences on topics to be addressed during these webinars. So if you have any curiosity or you would like to hear about a specific topic related to OSS within public administration, please feel free to drop some messages within the chat, and then we'll be taking into consideration your feedback for the future events.
Federica, if I may, we already have, as you know, the topic of the probably next webinar on one of the following ones. We want to continue on the topic of collaboration of public administrations, but this time a bit different angle, and to talk about how to build cross-administration collaboration for open source at the regional level or municipality level, how to organize this collaboration, what are the challenges that are faced by different organizations that deal with that, or public administrations itself. We are already discussing with some speakers that are keen on sharing their experience. But please share with us your interest and what would be an interesting topic for you to hear in one of the next webinars.
I see some comments also already in the chat, and just as a kind reminder, please share with us. It's important also to shape the next events around your needs. Monica, if you don't have additional comments before wrapping up, just to summarize the key insights that have been shared today with us. Today we are about the importance of formalizing the good practices into the governance model of a public administration, because this is directly related to the creation of a sustainable open source development culture. So to avoid that the culture is tied to single individuals rather than to an organization. So this is something to think about, how to introduce the good practices within the governance model of a public administration. Then we had another topic that is recurrent in the open source ecosystem and is always more important, and is about the modularity of the software. The modularity being one of the enablers to open one's community to other public administration and in general to the open source community in a more broader sense, because that allow reusability as well as the customization of the tool per se. And finally, another key insight that was shared today is that adapting to open source development culture includes also adapting a collaborative mindset, which must be reflected in any case in the software development processes, as well as in the publication of software documentation. And then we had from Stig the challenge about the language and a possible solution that was provided by Philippe. So,
if I may, Federico,
yep.
One really important conclusion from this webinar, how communication about both projects and open source in general and policy is important. And this was visible both in Stig's presentation when they are, let's say, starting with this process that was hindered by pandemics, but hopefully will progress soon. And the same for Lutece, that are actually, it's a very important aspect of Philippe's work. So we are here for you, because actually this is one of the important elements of our mission. So we are the platform when you can communicate about your project. So you're invited to share your experience.
Thanks a lot, Monica. Maybe just one set of information how to reach out to us in case of additional feedback or in case any insights that you would like to share with us. You can, of course, become a member of the community, and we'll be sharing the link within the chat. And we really encourage you to sign up to our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter. We will be sending out the summary of the month, some news items, some publications, and also some solutions. So please feel free to sign up, or alternatively to also activate the RSS feed function. It could be also a good way to receive a notification as soon as the latest article is out. And then don't hesitate to follow us on OSOR, to engage with us on OSOR, or to reach out to us through the email address that is displayed in the screen and was shared a few minutes ago within the chat. And we would like just to thank all of you to be here today, and also a special thank you to the speakers that shared their experiences. And we wish to see you next time, and we'll be communicating soon about the next event and the related date. I don't know, Monica, if you have any final remarks before wrapping up.
Just say also the same. Thank you very much for being here, our participants and speakers, and thank you very much for support of the team, OSOR team. And yes, please stay in touch with us via OSOR or email and Twitter. And see you at the next webinar.